The autumn rain pounded against Jack Wilson's window as he watched his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, struggling to place buckets under her leaking roof. At 35, Jack had spent years building his carpentry business while raising his 10-year-old daughter, Lucy, alone. "Dad, Mrs. Thompson's roof is getting worse," Lucy said, pressing her nose against their living room window. She looked sad. Jack knew that look well. Growing up in foster homes, he'd seen enough sadness to last a lifetime. He'd never known his biological family, just a name on his birth certificate and unanswered questions. Grabbing his rain jacket and tool belt, Jack headed next door. Mrs. Thompson, nearly 80, opened the door before he could knock. "Mrs. Thompson, I noticed your roof. I'm a carpenter. Let me take a look." Her eyes, a striking blue that seemed oddly familiar, welled with tears. "I can't afford repairs right now, Jack." "No charge," he smiled. Good neighbors look out for each other. Despite her protests, Jack was on her roof an hour later, examining the damage. The fix would be temporary, but it would keep her dry until spring. As he worked near the attic window, something caught his eye. A loose panel in the roof structure. Concerned about hidden damage, he carefully removed it, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a metal box, its contents protected from the elements. Jack called down to Mrs. Thompson, who insisted he bring it inside. Sitting at her kitchen table, hands trembling, Mrs. Thompson opened the box. Inside were photographs, letters, and a worn baby blanket with James embroidered in fading blue thread. "My son," she whispered, touching a photo of a young man. "Your father." Jack's world stopped. "What?" Mrs. Thompson's story poured out like the rain outside. She'd had a son, James, who'd married young. When James and his wife died in a car accident, their baby, Jack, had disappeared into the foster system before she could find him. "I searched for years," she said, showing him letters to adoption agencies, private investigators' reports. "I never stopped looking." Jack stared at the photo. He had his father's eyes, and his grandmother's. "But you've lived next door for 2 years," he managed. "How?" "I knew your name when you moved in," she admitted. "But I'd found and lost so many possible matches over the years. I was afraid to hope again." Lucy's voice interrupted them. "Dad, are you okay?" She stood in the doorway, having come to check on her father. Mrs. Thompson, her great-grandmother, covered her mouth, seeing her son's features in her great-granddaughter's face. That rainy afternoon became the first of many family gatherings. Mrs. Thompson shared stories of Jack's father, his laugh, his love of carpentry, that had unknowingly passed to his son. She showed Lucy family albums, filling in the blank pages of their history. The roof repair became a complete renovation, as Jack threw himself into fixing his grandmother's house. Each weekend, Lucy helped, learning both carpentry and family stories. One day, while painting the repaired ceiling, Jack found another surprise: a savings account document in his father's name. "Your father was saving for your college fund," Mrs. Thompson explained. "I could never access it without proving you were his son. Now it's yours." Jack used the money to expand his business, opening a carpentry school for foster kids, teaching them the trade that had saved him. Mrs. Thompson moved in with them, her house becoming the school's first location. Lucy thrived having her great-grandmother's influence, learning family recipes, and hearing bedtime stories about her grandfather. The holes in their family history slowly filled with love and understanding. 1 year later, at Lucy's 11th birthday party, Jack watched his daughter blow out candles, surrounded by friends from school and students from the carpentry program. Mrs. Thompson sat beside him, holding his hand. "You know," she said softly, "I prayed every night for 30 years to find you. Who would have thought a leaky roof would be the answer?" Jack smiled, thinking of the chain of events that had led to this moment. Sometimes we look so hard for answers, we don't realize they're right next door. Today, the Wilson Family Carpentry School helps dozens of foster kids learn a trade and find their place in the world. Jack and Lucy's story reminds them that family isn't just about blood. It's about the connections we build and maintain. Because sometimes, the greatest discoveries come when we're simply trying to help others. Sometimes fixing a roof can fix a broken family history. And sometimes, the answers to our deepest questions are closer than we think. We just need the courage to look. If this story touched your heart, remember to subscribe to Moments That Matter for more stories that remind us how acts of kindness can lead to unexpected blessings. Because every moment matters, and every act of compassion has the power to change lives in ways we never imagined.